Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the NAELPA podcast. We are so glad you're here. Each episode brings you voices from the field who challenge our thinking, strengthen our practice, and remind us of why our work matters so very much. And today is no different. I'm thrilled to welcome Tan Huynh, who will be a keynote speaker at the upcoming NAELPA conference. Tan is a career educator, a consultant, and author specializing in language acquisition and literacy development. And he brings a deep classroom experience, having taught students from 5th through 10th grade across private, public, charter, and international school settings. And he currently serves as a secondary teacher. In today's conversation, we're going to give you a preview of Tan's keynote at NAELPA, just teasing it a little bit, so you'll get a chance to hear a little bit about what's coming, including hearing directly from him about the focus of his session and what attendees can expect. If you're looking for practical insight grounded in real classroom experience, this is definitely a conversation that you do not want to miss. So welcome, Tan.
Well, it's an honor to be here with amazing NAELPA colleagues who are coming from around the U.S. So I'm excited to see you all in Chicago.
Awesome. So for our listeners who may be a little newer to your work, can you share just a little bit about your journey as an educator and what shaped your focus on language acquisition and literacy development?
Yes, I am. Authors will say that they write a book that they needed to read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I needed to read the book that I'm currently writing with Beth Skelton. We finished it like 2 weeks ago. We click sent to the publisher to call in. So we're really excited. I needed a book that would sit me down and say, this is how you teach from unit 1 to 2, that then builds to 2 to 3, then builds to 3 to 4 by the end of the year. We've had principles and practices and even standards. We have things from SIOP, we have WIDA, we have the Center for Applied Linguistics. We have all of these concepts, and they're intangible, but they're very central to our work. But I felt like I was trying to put the pieces together and not knowing how to do that. And then one summer, I stumbled upon, I don't know how, I stumbled upon The Writing Revolution by that Natalie Wexler and I forgot her last name. Oh my God. And it was a life-changing book. I still remember reading it. I was walking, just walking like around the block and just reading it on my Kindle. And I still remember having to stop, going back to my house, opening my laptop and starting typing, redoing my unit for next year. That was in June. And I started to play with writing instruction, reading instruction at the sentence level. And that has changed everything. Teaching students how to read at a sentence level, how to comprehend at a sentence level, how to speak at the sentence level, but at an academic level. Not just like, okay, just give me an answer, but like, give me an answer with this specific sentence structure that I learned from Judy Hopman. That's it. Judy Hopman and Natalie Wexler's fun, like career-changing book. And I said, let me apply this, their concepts of like teach these sentence structures to working with my multilinguals who have social language. They can talk to you about their football game. They can talk to you about their work after school. They can talk to you about their families, their cultures, social settings. But they struggle to use academic register to talk about more abstract concepts that require bringing one idea to the next. So I started playing with that. I started implementing the Writing Revolution into my units. And after 4 years of implementing this and trying it and then adding it with Understanding by Design and adding it with UDL and trying to put it all together with the teaching learning cycle and then adding WIDA and adding SIOP, it's like, this is something that I have seen with my own eyes that has worked for my students. And let's go back to that concept of saying, I needed a book like this because I felt so lost because the students that I'm currently teaching are those exact students. The LEMLs who have 5 years or more, who have been labeled and have received services, but yet they still plateau at the academic level. They still struggle to move from a 3 to a 4, a 4 to a 5 in WIDA. And so I needed this book to work with those students. How do you get them from, okay, they have social language, but how do you get them to academic language? And this is what I was missing as an elementary school student who exited ESL, who moved to middle school, who like charmed my way through to A's and B's. And then, but then I want to get to the SAT. When I took the AP test, I could not charm the assessment. And then the reality showed my gap between my social language, my charisma, and my academic language. So that's what I'm going to be sharing with colleagues.
Awesome.
NAELPA.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point. So, part of my role, you mentioned WIDA. There's another assessment consortium, NAELPA 21. We have states that are giving their own that they've developed. And all of those assessments are focused on the ability to use academic language to access rigorous grade level content. And you're so right when you talk about how, the social language develops pretty quickly because one, students are very motivated to learn it, right? They need that language to be able to communicate with their peers, to just navigate their daily lives. They don't always need academic language unless we really place structures in our classrooms and even in our communities where students are being asked to use that language. So I think that focus on academic language and understanding it just doesn't develop through osmosis. You have to have a lot of direct instruction, a lot of structured practice. So I love that you're focusing on that because I think so often we do sort of get lulled into this idea that once their social languages sounds really fluent, they're good to go, right? And that's absolutely not the case. So I'm excited to hear more about sort of your, not just, your keynote, but talk to you a little bit more about this idea of the sentence level. So let's talk a little bit about your keynote, but of course, we don't want to give too much away. You are a keynote speaker at the NAELPA conference this year, and can you share just a little sneak peek? You shared a bit already about what you're focusing on, but why do you think this message that you're going to be delivering is so especially important for educators of multilingual learners right now? Like, if you could just give us a little insight on why you think this is the right time for this message.
It's so important right now. It's because students without academic language, doors close for them.
Yeah.
And doors such as scholarships, such as college entrances, such as state standardized assessments, such as university exams or assessments like entrance assessments, like SAT, the ACTs. But that's the academic side. But if we don't progress, when they get into the university, let's say that they pass these or like barely pass, or just like me, I barely passed these things. And I got into a great university and college. But my teachers were like, what is going on? How did you get to this school? So I went to Dickinson College, fabulous liberal arts university, ranked number 43 in the US.
Very nice.
And my thank you. And my professor would I still remember my professor in the freshman year, he would send this back. He would say, we don't write like this at all. It seems like there's like no connection between your ideas. And I thought I was just supposed to fill the page as much as I can. I was trying to reach 3,000 words. And he said, no, you have to structure your ideas. You have to introduce, you have to have an introduction. You have to have a thesis. And I was like, what's a thesis? Where can I buy one? And he's like, oh. So he sent me to the writing center where there's like very proficient academic upperclassmen who would sit down and they would walk you through, like, this is how you write an introduction. This is how you write a thesis. This is how you transition between one paragraph to the next. This is how you sequence your ideas so it's progressively more convincing. And then I was like, what? I've never had anyone sit down with me to conference with me to show me how to write academic language. I was always assigned. And it's to answer your question, why is it so important here? Is because students who are experienced multilinguals who have a social language and trying to develop academic language, is that teachers often assign, assuming that they have academic proficiency. But what
Mhm.
they really need is explicit instruction to say, this is how you write an introduction. And in the introduction, this is how you sequence an idea. Let's look at the thesis. This is what the thesis looks like. Here, let's look at your narrative. Narrative has a certain structure. Let's write this narrative. Let's write with an analytical paragraph. Here's where you put the evidence, not the beginning, not the end, right in the middle. And so these things were they're like invisible. There are
Yeah.
learned from students who read a lot and who come from highly educated families. Uh, but for my family, when I was an immigrant family, and like my mother didn't write like this. She came from a
Mhm.
poor provincial background. We were immigrants. We did not get this explicit instruction, and I went to a fabulous public school in the U.S. outside of Philadelphia, and we were considered a blue ribbon school. So all the teachers believe that, and rightly so, our students, because they came from a blue ribbon school system, that they can just assign these instructions, and the students will be able to produce. Yes, for my colleagues, for my classmates, yes, but for me because it wasn't explicitly taught, because most of my writing and reading instruction was assigned and assessed, I missed out on that opportunity to get explicit instruction. And that is what happens that's what MLs need. Experienced multilinguals. They need explicit instruction for academic language. And I'll show specifically what that looks like in the keynote.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point that I've been thinking a lot about over the last several years. I'm absolutely in agreement that our focus on literacy is the right focus. I think where we're missing the boat a bit is that has subsumed every minute of the language block, and we're not getting time in the daily schedule for writing. Like writing becomes sort of this side thing that if you need an activity, they'll write something, right? But it's not part of like your lesson planning as you're planning direct instruction. So I really see, as we've really focused in on literacy and we've been sort of honing in on that as a key, sort of cornerstone for really everything in education. Which again, I'm definitely not criticizing that move and that focus, but I'm seeing so many more of our students, not just our multilingual learners, but all of our students are struggling with writing. They're not able to write in the way we're talking about, where we understand that there are different writing styles for different purposes. And that's not something students are just going to come about, right? And even if you widely read, you're still not going to necessarily figure out that the writing process is something that needs to be explicitly instructed and needs a lot of practice, just like reading, right? So I'm glad that you're going to be focusing in on that, and that we're going to sort of have that conversation about how do we get writing back into the curriculum and really intentionally so.
And then that's where I think maybe we should end this last podcast interview with that, because I know everything that I share has to be practical, and I know that
Yeah.
I want to share with teachers who are listening right now something very practical. You asked the question, how do we more intentionally teach writing and not just
Mhm.
reading and literacy? What I say is move away from let's do reading activities and then let's do writing activities
Right.
separately after everything's done. Now, what my new move is, my new structure, the framework is you read a small section of text, maybe a paragraph, maybe two, maybe a page. And then you stop and you ask students to say, okay, let's process this very small segment of text, answer this question. For example, recount the events on this page.
Hmm.
Then we don't end there. We say, start your sentence with before. Now students have to start the sentence with before dot 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 dot, comma, pass.
Uh-huh.
Or we can say, now this is a recount. Because it's a recount, recount what the character did after they da 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 da. Start
Mhm.
your sentence with after.
Yeah.
Now students have this structure of saying after da 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 da. It's not just give me an answer. I'm happy. We are so um, correct answer happy that we want to move to the next content instead of saying no. I want the right answer, the correct answer, the text-based answer, but can you put it in a specific sentence structure? And
Hmm.
so we read,
Yeah.
and then students answer the reading comprehension question, nothing new, but in a very specific sentence structure, so that by the end of the unit, all these little sentences that they have learned will be able to put together. Because let's say that by the end of a unit, you want students to summarize, recount the major event in the story. This is what I would tell my students. Start your paragraph using something called FATNI. FATNI. My students know that it starts with F first, comma, A after that, comma, T then, comma, N next, comma, in the end, comma. Because we have directly practiced first, after, then, next, in the end, in very specific separated functions to process the text earlier, students know by the end of the unit, they can write a structured recount paragraph.
Awesome.
And that is how we teach. We integrate reading, writing, speaking, and listening together.
That's awesome. And you kind of come back full circle to where we started with this idea that students are struggling to be able to exit out of EL status. Because if you're really going to be able to meet the rigorous academic standards that are written into our English language proficiency standards across the country, you have to be able to integrate the 4 domains of language. And you really do have to be able to see how it all fits together. So I think you're right. We're seeing kids struggle to exit simply because the content instruction and even sometimes the ELP instruction doesn't focus on the integration of all 4 domains of language. So
yeah,
it's very
because it looks like this. It looks like, okay, let's do vocabulary.
Yeah.
Then let's do listening.
Yeah.
Then let's do writing and then reading.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a separate activities, but instead of saying, we're going to read a text, we're going to then, so in the reading of text, you're listening. But I'm going to have you turn and talk to a partner to process the content. That's speaking and listening to each other. Then I'm going to have you co-create a sentence to answer this question of recount what happened to the character in this page. Start your sentence with after. Work with your partners to write that sentence, and they listening and talking, debating, and then they're writing. That is the integration. And it's not do extra worksheets, do extra conferences. It's how do we do instruction differently, more integratedly. That's not a word. I just created a word, y'all.
Hey, we're going to pick that up and run with it integratedly. That's awesome. You know what? I think you've already done this just with what you said here, but what do you hope that people who attend, whether they're teachers, coaches, leaders, what do you hope that people who attend your session are going to feel more confident about or inspired to do differently in their own practice after they leave?
I hope teachers are more confident in how to explicitly teach, systematically plan for, and intentionally teach academic language instead of assign or hope or feel frustrated that, like, I don't know what's happening. Why can't Jose? Why can't Maria? Why can't whoever cannot move from answering simple questions to more academic language? And now I hope that with the workshop or with the keynote, teachers will say, there is a structure, there is a path, and there is clarity. And when there is clarity, there's a sense of peace.
I love that. That's a great place for us to end our conversation. So I want to just say thank you so much, Tom, for being here today and for giving us a sneak peek into what attendees are going to be able to expect at the NAELPA conference in your session. Your ability to connect language development, literacy, and classroom practice in such a meaningful way, I think is exactly what our educators need right now. So I want to also thank our NAELPA podcast listeners. We hope this conversation has excited you to hear more from Tan at the NAELPA conference. And be sure to check out all the conference sessions and our podcast episodes. Until next time, thank you so much for all the important work you do every day to support our multilingual learners. And we will see you soon in Chicago.
See you all in Chicago.